All right, evening, everybody. Good evening.
Yes, sir. Good day.
All right, so what's wrong with my... All right, so can you just remind me what are some of the things we discussed in the last class? Anybody remember some of the things we discussed in the last class?
What is globalization?
Mm-hmm.
International business. What is it? So they look on. How do you look on the impact of international business on the Caribbean?
Yes.
Would you do a discussion on that as well? A little debate.
Right, we looked at the pros and cons of globalization.
Yeah. Advantages and disadvantages.
Right, and persons had to cite various examples. So so in other words, we really have started with unit 2, and let me just show you the unit, and then we're going to go into unit 1 because to some extent we're somewhat finished with, where is it? With so this is where we are: define international business, define globalization, discuss issues of global organizations. Some of this we're going to discuss now, and then we're going to also focus heavily on how geographic diversity can affect economic development of a country. And a perfect example would be Canada. A perfect example of that is how geographic diversity can impact economic development. And then we're going to also look at the importance of geography in the understanding of international markets. All right, so that's where we are. And then now we're going to go over into the history of globalization, the history of multinational corporations, and the history of foreign direct investments. We're going to also begin our tutorials today in the last hour of the class, or the last half hour of the class, rather. I've started working on the paper, and I already have the questions that each person, well, I'm going to allow each person is going to, well, not each person, but you're going to work as peers to respond to the question, but I'll show you how that part is done. Oh yes, in the library, there are 3 books that you can use. Let me just tell you the names of the books. I actually went to the library today. The issue with the books though is that none of them are overnight. You can't take them out of the library, which is quite unfortunate. It is, let me stop sharing and just put it in the chat. Oh, I need to claim host. Let me just claim host briefly, quick. Just give me 1 sec. I thought I'd claimed host. Okay. 79. And going forward, I'm going to start, once 2 persons are here, I'm going to start the class because the class is already small and the content is quite a lot of content, and we only have 10 weeks for summer school. All right, so we have to really move along in terms of completing the respective modules. So the books that are in the library, oh yes, I wanted to. Didn't we form a WhatsApp group? Did we form a WhatsApp group? I'm trying to remember. International. Was there a WhatsApp group?
I'm asking, sir.
Yeah, we need to have a WhatsApp group because there are times when I find some videos that can really, instead of sitting down and reading this thing forever, business, you can actually listen to the videos and understand what is happening, by Charles Hill. And the other one is one of which I have with me. All right, so let's who is very tech savvy can create a WhatsApp group quickly. Because with my other class, Principles of Marketing, I just share videos with them. Sometimes I get a link to something and quickly they can, we can interact if you have any questions or anything like that. Because I'm sure you people are more on your phone than you read your emails. So who's tech savvy enough to form the WhatsApp group?
Could I delete it in sir?
All right. So can you just create the group? Is it that we need to, can you create it and then share the link, or can you do that?
I tried, sir.
Okay. All right. So while you're doing that, let me while you're working on that, let's just look a little bit at global organizations. What are global organizations? That's something that we really need to talk about. And there are different types of global organizations. And please remember, people, when you come to class, you need to be taking notes. That's very, very important. All right. Very, very important that you are actually taking notes. I'm going to share screen.
An international organization is an organization with an international membership, scope, or presence. There are two main types. 1. International non-governmental organizations, INGOs, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that operate internationally. These include international non-profit organizations and worldwide companies such as the World Organization of the Scout Movement, International Committee of the Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières. 2. Intergovernmental organizations, also known as international governmental organizations, IGO-S, the type of organization most closely associated with the term international organization. These are organizations that are made up primarily of sovereign states, referred to as member states. Notable examples include the United Nations (UN), Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD), Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe (OSCE), Council of Europe (CO), International Labour Organization (ILO), World Trade Organization (WTO), World Health Organization (WHO). The UN has used the term intergovernmental organization instead of international organization for clarity. The first and oldest intergovernmental organization is the Central Commission for Navigation on the Rhine, created in 1815 by the Congress of Vienna. The role of international organizations are helping to set the international agenda, mediating political bargaining, providing place for political initiatives, and acting as catalysts for coalition formation. International organizations also define the salient issues and decide which issues can be grouped together, thus help governmental priority determination or other governmental arrangements.
All right. So was that clear to you in terms of what are international organizations, the types of international organizations, and the examples of these types of international organizations? Was that clear? Anybody can, what did you get from what you listened to? I am listening. Nobody got anything? Didn't get anything from the recording? Hello? We didn't get anything. Christopher, Jerome, Rachel, Shanique didn't get anything from the recording. Do I need to replay?
Yes,
Guys, talk to me.
replay, please, and thank you.
Okay, all right. If I can find it. Okay, where did I should be able to go back and back and back to find it.
An international organization is an organization with an international membership, scope, or presence. There are two main types. 1. International non-governmental organizations, INGOs, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that operate internationally. These include international non-profit organizations and worldwide companies such as the World Organization of the Scout Movement, International Committee of the Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières. 2. Intergovernmental organizations, also known as international governmental organizations, IGO-S, the type of organization most closely associated with the term international organization. These are organizations that are made up primarily of sovereign states, referred to as member states. Notable examples include the United Nations (UN), Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD), Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe (OSCE), Council of Europe (CO), International Labour Organization (ILO), World Trade Organization (WTO), World Health Organization (WHO). The UN has used the term intergovernmental organization instead of international organization for clarity. The first and oldest intergovernmental organization is the Central Commission for Navigation on the Rhine, created in 1815 by the Congress of Vienna. The role of international organizations are helping to set the international agenda, mediating political bargaining, providing place for political initiatives, and acting as catalysts for coalition formation. International organizations also define the salient issues and decide which issues can be grouped together, thus help governmental priority determination or other governmental arrangements.
All right, can you know talk to me, what did you hear about international organizations or the concept of international organization? I am listening. Didn't hear anything, people? Is it that you hear but you don't understand, or? Hello, talk to me, people. Why are you so silent? Is it that you hear and don't understand, or what's happening? Christopher, what say you? I see your mic unmuted. Come on, people, talk to me. Talk to me, people. Is it that you hear and don't understand? At least say that so I can, explain, but I'm hearing silence. I'm not even sure if you're hearing me.
Sir, please explain. I hear, but I don't understand.
All right, so the question I'm asking about is international. They use the term global organization. So what they want to call it global organization or international organization. So they're talking about organizations that play a role in international affairs or play a role in world affairs. And they mention two main types, that you have what are called NGOs or non-governmental organizations, and as well as intergovernmental organizations. You have never heard the term NGOs, non-governmental organizations? Have you ever heard that term, non-governmental organizations?
Yes, sir, upon the news.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So Red Cross is an example of a non-governmental organization, and there are several others. And then they mention intergovernmental organization. And once you hear intergovernmental organization, you know that you're talking about governments of individual countries, or they call them member states. So even CARICOM would be an example of intergovernmental, because CARICOM really operates as a quote unquote regional bloc, as an international organization that caters to the needs of Caribbean states, right? And they mention other examples such as the World Trade Organization. And as it says, World Trade Organization, it regulates international trade. They mention, for example, the International Labor, I think it's International Labor Organization, that speaks to issues relating to labor in sovereign states. All right, they mention, for example, the United Nations, that play a critical role around the world. And under United Nations, you have other bodies that come to the fore, such as UNESCO and so forth. So it's important for you to understand that these particular, that international or global organizations actually play a role in international business, because that's where we're really heading. For example, the World Trade Organization sets the rules for trading internationally. So you're going to come across concepts such as general agreements on tariffs and trade, stuff like that, GATS. You're going to come across other international bodies include, for example, the World Intellectual Property Organization that deals with property rights. So there are several international bodies, and I'm sure there are many times when you hear, for example, certain human rights groups that are international bodies will say, for example, there's a state that is violating the rights of its citizens because one persons don't have access to health care, or they're not being able to vote, or whatever it is. So international organizations play a critical role in world affairs or in international trade. That's very, very critical. And I want you to understand that within the context of international business, because that too, those organizations sometimes directly and indirectly affect the way our international businesses operate, or affect our businesses, international businesses trade. Let's now listen a little bit now to a kind of historicization of international organizations.
Around the world, from small technical.
Oh yes, and that's another thing too, that there's something called, I actually have it jotted down here. They kind of set the agenda for I'm sure you've heard about the international or the world order. Many times that's where they kind of set the world order or the international agenda, and there are actual international laws. They are not, and even the international, I think it's called ICC, the International Criminal Court, where have you ever heard, like, for example, they are prosecuting a prime minister from a certain country for human rights violations. So they actually cater to these, cater to the needs of different countries, and also to that, for example, the international governmental organizations are made up of member states or countries. All right, so let's listen a little bit more about the concept of international organizations.
International organizations have existed since the 19th century, but it is really during the second half of the 20th century that they have increased in number and in importance. Today, there are a few hundred international organizations around the world, from small technical organizations established between neighboring states, like a bilateral river commission, to universal organizations entrusted with crucial political tasks like the United Nations. International organizations play an important role in what can be called the global governance. Their expertise and professionalism is relied upon by states, and states often turn to them in order to design, decide, and implement common policies. And of course, this is not without raising some concerns and some problems of legitimacy and accountability. But those issues are largely political issues rather than purely legal ones. And despite their importance, this course will unfortunately not be able to address all of them. Despite their differences in composition, in size, and in object and purpose, international organizations can be defined from a legal point of view as associations of states and or of other organizations, associations that are established between them to serve specific tasks and which are equipped for that purpose with permanent organs. And let me take those elements in turn. First, an international organization is an association. Unlike states, whose creation is to a large extent the result of a factual process, international organizations are always the result of a free intent to get together and act together. Second, an association, as an association, the international organization has members. In many instances, those members are states, and this explains why international organizations are also often referred to as being intergovernmental organizations. But other international organizations may also be members of international organizations if the rules of the organization allows it. And for instance, while only states may be members of the United Nations, separate customs territory having full autonomy in the conduct of external commercial relations can also be members of the World Trade Organization. And this is why, for instance, the European Community, now the European Union, has been a founding member of the WTO alongside the European Union member states. Organizations are established as a result of a juridical act, usually a treaty, concluded between the founding members. The organization is not party to the treaty under which it has been established, but such treaty will be the basic instrument of the organization. It will be binding upon the organization, and it will be like a constitution for the organization. It is because their membership is made of other subjects of international law, and it is because their creation results from an act governed by international law that international organizations can be distinguished from domestic law associations like NGOs or other legal entities constituted under the laws of a specific country. 3. An international organization is established between its members in order to serve specific tasks. Organizations are based on functionalism. They are there to fulfill certain functions and are, for that matter, specialized. For instance, an international organization can be established in order to monitor and to protect migrating birds, or in order to design and coordinate the rules relating to civil aviation, or in order to regulate fisheries in certain oceans, or, as the International Criminal Court, to prosecute and to judge individuals accused of having committed grave international crimes. We'll revert to this element of functionalism and of speciality when addressing the personality and the powers of international organizations. 4, and lastly, international organizations are equipped with permanent organs. Those organs are usually a secretariat made of international civil servants and some governing body where the members of the organization are represented. And those organs are permanent. An international organization is not an ad hoc international conference set up for a certain purpose during a couple of weeks or months. The permanent character of the organs will make the organization an institution with its habits, its character, and its internal culture. To put it bluntly, international organizations are bureaucracies. And by this, I do not want to mock them or to be pejorative in any way. On the contrary, as Max Weber demonstrated, bureaucracies are profoundly rational and they are central to any modern way to govern. Moreover, law is central to bureaucracies, and bureaucracies are moved by the law. By this, I mean that bureaucrats always act by referring to the legal instruments and the rules in order to justify their action. Bureaucrats, civil servants, derive their power and their authority from the law and always refer and rely on it to give reasons for their actions. And this is true in national bureaucracies, but it is somehow squared in international bureaucracies. In any international organization, when a new task is envisaged, the first question that will need to be addressed is to know what legal basis entitles the organization to carry it out. And that is a question for lawyers. And as that question will always somehow refer to the international instrument under which the organization is established, which is an instrument governed by international law, that question will be a question of international law itself.
All right. Anybody understand? I put some notes in the chat. So international organizations are really an association. They're made up of member states, and they can also be made up of international bodies, which is true. They set the parameters of international relations. In other words, how countries interact with each other. They set internet by way of a treaty. The treaty is really a document that outlines the roles and functions of the organizations and how they will interact with each other and what is their mission and vision and so forth. And the treaty is an instrument that sets up the roles and functions of the international body. They usually members pay a dues. So members pay dues, and also to that international organizations can either be bilateral and or multilateral. All right, so I kind of put some notes in the chat for you to kind of understand. I know that some of this information is, you're just hearing it for the first time, so it might be a little bit, it might take some time for you to digest it. What I'm going to ask you to do in another 5 or so minutes, 5-10 minutes, is to identify an international organization. So room 1 will look at one that is an intergovernmental organization, and room 2 will look at one that is non-governmental or an NGO. All right, and then you tell us the rules and function. What's the name of the international organization? When was it established, and what are some of the rules and functions? So let me just put founding, roles and functions, and accomplishments. Let me put latest accomplishments because I don't want to tell me about things that happened 25 years ago. So I'm going to put it into groups. And so room 1, it's Christopher, Kayla, and Rachel. Room 2, it's Jerome and Shanique. So everybody understands what you're doing, identifying an international body, and you're going to tell me when was it founded. You're going to tell me the roles and functions of that international body and its latest accomplishments. Room 1, you're going to do the intergovernmental, choose an intergovernmental organization, and room 2, you're going to choose an NGO, a non-governmental organization. Everybody understands? Hello? Talk to, okay. All right, so I've opened the room. 10 minutes I'm giving you. Please remember, try to share screen if you need to, and choose the person or persons who will be talking on behalf of the group in the case of room 1, and who will be talking on behalf of the peer in room 2. So please enter the rooms. Rachel, you're still not in the room. Kayla and Shanique, please go into your respective rooms. So room 1, you're doing intergovernmental. Room 2, you're doing non-governmental. $10 minutes. Oh. All right, so I gave you some additional time to, just in case you wanted to do anything else. Christopher and Kayla, go ahead for me. Talk to us about your intergovernmental organization. Christopher and Kayla, are you guys there? Kayla, you're breaking up. I don't know if Christopher can talk. Kayla, we're not hearing you. You're breaking up and your mic is muted, so I'm not sure if you're talking. Come on, guys. The time is going. Let's try and, or Christopher, can you talk? Christopher, Kayla, are you guys going to say something? Hello? Okay.
So were you hearing me before?
I'm just hearing you clearly now. Go ahead.
Okay, so the company that we chose was United Nations.
United Nations is not a company, it's
It
an
was
international organization. So you can't call
right. So
it
the
a,
international organization that
right.
we chose was United Nations. It was founded on October 24th, 1945 in California. And some of the roles and functions is to maintain international peace and security, give assistance to humanitarians who are in need, and protect human and upheld international law. So in regards to the latest accomplishments, in 2018, United Nations assisted more than 34 million refugees, and they authorized 71 international peacekeeping missions, and they work with 140 nations to minimize climate change, and they assist about 50 countries per year with their elections.
Thank you very much. Kayla, just mute your mic for me. Thank you. Room 2, Jerome, Shanique, go ahead.
Yes, sir. All right, so we looked at ISO, sir. It's a non-governmental organization establishing
ISO sounds like an acronym. What's the actual meaning?
Oh, International Organization for Standardization, sir. Sorry about that. They were established in February of 1947. ISO is mainly focused on bringing experts together to share knowledge on developing markets. Hold on, let me have everything jumbled up on the paper, sir. So their standards support innovations, and they look at changing the way we look at global challenges. Some of their main accomplishments over the years is ISO one of three, which I wrote down. ISO 9001 2015, which is a quality management system. It's a quality management system standards. And then you have the solid recovered fuel. That is a more recent one for dealing with and the name of it is ISO 21912 2021. Yes, so basically that's it.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you guys very much. And please remember, you must participate. All right. You must participate. I need to hear your voices because you will understand that the course is a higher order course and you have to engage with a lot of information, most of which are going to be foreign to you, and you are required to produce. So please comment and participate. So thanks very much, room 1 and room 2. Now we move on to the whole notion of geography and how geography can affect economic development. That's very, very critical. But let me ask you this. Do you think that geography can affect world trade? And if you think so, how? Can geography affect world trade?
And they say geography, sir. What do you mean?
What do you think I mean?
Location.
Let's take, all right, so let's start there. If you think I'm talking location, talk to me about location.
I want a question again, sir.
So I'm saying, how can geography affect trade? Let's say world trade.
Oh. I guess, so I don't know.
No, think about it.
Sir.
All right, let's put up a map of the world, quote unquote, of the world. And let's see if we can look at the map and determine. You said location, right? Let's see if any of these, sometimes when I click on one. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, sir.
And the flags represent where the countries are. So this is the United States, this is Canada, this is Brazil. There are various countries in Africa and so forth. This is Australia, this is China. Yes, talk to me.
No, I guess geography can affect global trade depending upon countries and their I remember saying not every country trade with each other, sir. Right? So that one thing will probably affect it. The time where things take for reach to the other countries, I guess. I really know, sir. I just agree.
No, man, you're on the right path to continue. Think about it in terms of supply chain too.
Yeah, so things might take, like goods from China could take a 3 month, all of them things there, while things from the US might take a week or so. And everybody US trade with, so that I go kind of, and everybody China trade with, or so on and so forth. So them would be at a disadvantage to whichever country they don't trade with. That country would be at a disadvantage. So I guess it would have messed up global trade. Because they would have find other routes to get things in for them country. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, okay, you're reasoning it out. It could be too that countries that are closer together might trade together or form regional blocks. So they might form trading blocks. So countries in the Caribbean, because of their history and their geography, they form trading blocks. It could be that because Canada and America is right next door to each other, they might form the North American Free Trade Agreement. It could be that the countries that now make up Europe, the European Union, because of their location and sometimes because of their history, they form a trading block. So they trade with each other, but they also work as a group together when working with outside countries. You might also look at location in terms of, as you rightly say, the routes. So you're talking about countries that are considered that have coastal resources. So they might have an advantage over a country that is probably inside of Africa. Let's just say that this country wants to trade with another country, but they have to send the goods. It will be very difficult for a country inside here now, as opposed to the country that is closer to the water, because these now become what? Supply chains.
Yeah, supply chain.
Routes to
Roots.
right, of supply chain. So of
Mhm.
course, geography again will affect world trade. I hope it's making sense now.
Yes, sir. Come like I got talk about tariff and them.
And there you go now. So geography, and then again, no, geography might affect tariff, because some persons might say, but hold on, your country is so far away, and in my country they produce this particular good. Why should I lower my tariff as opposed to the domestic market? Or is it that I'm supposed to subsidize these domestic suppliers or manufacturers, so that they can also compete with countries that can produce them on a mass base? It could be that America is here, but they form a bilateral agreement with another geographical country because of the resources that are in that country and because of the labor force that they have in that country. You see what I mean? So geography can and does affect economic development. Let's listen to, let's hear a little bit more about it. And this again, I say you have to make some notes, listen and make some notes.
Think about some of the biggest and most prosperous cities you've been to. What do many of them have in common? Water! They sit on a major coast or on a major river. This map shows GDP density, how much GDP is produced per square kilometer. You can see that the coasts of the US and the areas along the navigable rivers of the Great Lakes regions are just chock full of GDP. Likewise in Western Europe, in Japan, along the coast of China, and the coast of Australia. Why is this? It's much cheaper to transport goods over water than over land. So, Adam Smith argued that access to water reduced the cost of trade and gave merchants access to larger markets. In turn, larger markets gave merchants a greater incentive to specialize and to innovate. As a result, civilization grew where trade was easiest. Even today, countries that are landlocked are on average poorer than countries that have access to a coast. What's the most landlocked continent of all? It also happens to be the continent with the most poor countries, Africa. First off, Africa is enormous. You can fit most of the United States, China, India, and a lot of Europe into Africa. That's big. Second, Africa is landlocked. While Africa is far bigger in total size than Europe, if you just measure the coastline, Europe has 2 to 3 times more coastline than does Africa. And because Africa is big and landlocked, trade is more expensive and economic growth slower to start. What we learned from this foray into civilization and geography is 2 things. First, being landlocked is like a natural tariff, a natural tax on trade. And if natural tariffs are bad for growth, then perhaps tariffs created by governments aren't that great for growth either. Second, growth is not just about policy. Some places have natural blessings that have helped those places to prosper, and that too helps us understand our world. If you want to test yourself, click.
All right. Did you understand some of what was being the kind of nexus between geography and international trade? What are some of the things you got from this particular video?
Well, basically, sir, basically just to clear up what you would have tell a while ago about the same Africa and the landlocked thing. So through them have less coastline, it make it harder for them deal with logistics. It costs more to ship things there.
Right.
So that in return made the country them use a word, but I remember the word. Yeah. Compared to Europe countries that have more coasts. And them talk about GDP density. We're read up on that still. But yeah, basically them have paint a better picture to where you did say before, sir.
Okay. All right. So in other words, when you have coastal lines, you have access to greater markets. And that is partly why the Caribbean was colonize because it's a coastal region. It's really a coastal region. So they will come here, make money from the Caribbean, and then repatriate the money back to their home country. And there's a contrast between this notion of coastal countries, quote unquote, coastal countries, as opposed to landlocked countries, where landlocked countries, they have limited amount of coastal lines, meaning that they have limited access to logistics, as you rightly say, or to trading for international trade, versus other countries that have those particular kinds of things. All right, let's listen to another one, because this, again, now, it's very important to understand geography in relation to economic development.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to begin a new unit. We're going to be talking about geography and development. And by geography, I mean the relatively immutable and constant features, things like location, topography, climate, including temperature, rainfall, soil quality, wildlife, especially parasites, and the influence of all of these on development. This is obviously a big topic, so today we're just going to focus on geography and trade. So I want to begin by giving two perspectives on trade. The first is the Ricardian perspective. So Ricardo said, when two countries specialize in their comparative advantage, that is, they specialize in producing the good which they can produce at lowest opportunity cost, and then they trade, both nations are better off. Now notice that innovation is not the focus of Ricardo. So Ricardo says there already are two goods, wine and cloth. We can get more of both goods if Portugal specializes in producing wine, England specializes in producing cloth, and then they trade. So for Ricardo, trade is about improvements in static efficiency. Notice also that in Ricardo, market size is really not a key variable. The situation is very different in Adam Smith. Adam Smith has a completely different theory of trade. Let's take a look at that. Smith lays out his theory of trade in a chapter in The Wealth of Nations called "The Division of Labor is Limited by the Extent of the Market." And Smith makes this remarkable and very deep insight. He says, as by means of water carriage, that is by ship and boat, a more extensive market is opened to every sort of industry than what land carriage alone can afford it. So it is upon the seacoast and along the banks of navigable rivers that industry of every kind naturally begins to subdivide and improve. So what Adam Smith is saying is that when you're along a seacoast, you have access to a larger market. You can sell your goods in a larger market. And because of that, you get economies of scale, but also you get specialization of knowledge. You get people learning more as they produce more. This creates improvements. So for Adam Smith, trade is a dynamic growth story. Trade means larger markets. Larger markets means more specialization. It means more improvements in knowledge, and therefore it means more growth. So let's take a look at Adam Smith's theory and see if we can see it today. So what we have here is a map of GDP density. That is the amount of GDP produced per square kilometer. And what you can see from this map is that Smith was absolutely correct. So what you can see is that where GDP is, where civilization is, it's along the coasts. Here's the coastal United States and along these navigable rivers, the Great Lakes region. You can also see Western Europe, okay, all along the coast, all of this coastal area, Western Europe, highly developed. Over here, Japan, and of course it's the coast of China, which is rapidly developing due to those export markets. Here again, the coast of Australia. Now, in fact, what you can also see is that even in places where there are great institutions, where they have institutions of law and order and property rights and incentives and so forth, that we can still have low GDP per square kilometer. So take a look at Canada. So most of Canada, it's like the Sahara Desert, okay, in terms of GDP. Canada, where Canada is developed, it's along the coast and along navigable rivers close to the United States. Even in the United States, there are entire regions which really are bereft of GDP, which are almost as barren as is the Sahara Desert. So if you're looking just at institutions, you might say, well, even in the United States where we have these...
All right, so one thing I want you to understand when they talk about GDP density, they're talking about the it's a measure of economic activity by area. So what they're saying here is that if you look primarily at the coastal regions of the world, that you will find that more economic activities are happening in those particular areas. So if you look here along the coastal section of the United States, a lot of activities. I think this is the Bahamas. I think this is the Bahamas. Is this the Bahamas? I don't remember if this is the Bahamas or Honduras. This is actually two countries. And also coastal regions in Europe and also on this side of the world, Japan and so forth. So the argument is that the coastal regions have higher economic activity per square mile versus those that do not. And if a country has more coastal quote unquote regions, then of course the higher the economic activity in comparison to other countries, or in comparison to in comparison to other countries. Is that clear? Please answer.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
great institutions, there's plenty of places where there isn't much GDP, so it must be something else. And geography, in particular closeness to rivers and closeness to the seacoast, is an important element of this. By the way, economists really used to ignore geography, and it's due to Jeff Sachs and some of his co-authors, in particular John Gallup and Andrew Mellinger, that a lot of this work started to be done. In addition to the article which I've noted here, these three authors have a review article in Scientific American 2001 called The Geography of Poverty and Wealth, which I recommend. Now, if being close to rivers, if being close to the seacoast is important, then what is the worst thing? Well, the worst thing that can happen is if you are landlocked. Let's take a look. So what we're showing here is GDP per capita in countries which have access to the coast over here compared to countries which are landlocked over here. And what you see immediately is that countries which are landlocked have half, actually a little bit less than half the GDP of countries which have access to the coast. If we look here over here at the landlocked countries, you can see there's actually a few landlocked ones in Europe, Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, of course, Switzerland. But equally true, these countries are actually quite close to the coast, and they're close to other rich countries. If you take those countries out, the differences become even more stark. Among the landlocked nations, the richest outside of Europe is actually Botswana, which has diamonds. Pretty lucky for them. What you also notice is that all of these countries here, they're all in Africa. In fact, Africa has more landlocked countries than any other continent. Let's take a close look at why this is the case. Okay, here's a standard looking map of the world. You've probably all seen it before. It's not obvious from this map why Africa should be particularly landlocked, but there's also something funny about this map, something odd. Take a look at Greenland. Greenland on this map looks huge. It looks almost as big as Africa. And yet when you check the statistics, what you find is that Greenland is in fact 11th the size of Africa. What's going on? Well, this is actually an illusion. It's an illusion created by the particular projection we've used, the Mercator Projection, to project a 3D surface, namely a globe, onto 2 dimensions. Whenever you take a 3D surface and you map it in 2 dimensions, you're bound to get some illusions. And in this case, we get the illusion of size. Let's take a look at a different projection. This is the Albers Projection, which maintains equal sizes areas. We're going to get some illusions about the shape of continents, but we're going to get the right equivalent sizes. And on this projection, what you see quite correctly is that Greenland is much smaller than Africa. What you also see is that Africa is huge. Africa is an enormous continent. Let's also show that in a different way. Okay, here's another way of looking at Africa, and what you can see, again, Africa is big. You can fit the entire United States, excluding Alaska, into Africa. You can put China as well into Africa. India can go into Africa. Eastern Europe, most of Europe. Here's Italy, Germany, France, and Spain, and so forth. Now remember that chunk in the United States, which is inland, which had low GDP, we'll just map that into Africa, and you can see what is going on. Here's another way of looking at this. Let's go back to our projection. Take a look at the coastline of Africa. Okay, there's the coastline of Africa. Now compare with the coastline of Europe. Well, in Europe, you've got all these nooks and crannies and inlets and seas. Here's the Black Sea over here and so forth. In fact, what you find if you do this, if you measure the coastline, is the coastline of Europe is 2 to 3 times longer than the coastline of Africa. 2 to 3 times, by the way, because it can actually differ depending upon how you measure those fjords and so forth in Europe. The fractal nature of coastline makes it a little bit arbitrary to measure. Basic point, however, is Europe is much smaller than Africa, and yet the coastline of Europe, the access to the ocean, access to the seas, to navigable rivers, much, much larger. So Europe has much more access to trade than does Africa. So let's review briefly. From Adam Smith, we have that seacoasts and navigable rivers, that leads to trade, to larger markets. Larger markets, that means more specialization and improvements in knowledge. And improvements in knowledge lead to growth. In contrast with this, if you're landlocked, you don't get those trade, you don't get larger markets, you don't get that specialization, you don't get that improvement in knowledge, and instead you get stagnation. Now again, let's apply this to Africa. Adam Smith, in fact, had the theory and the application down in 1776. He says there are in Africa none of those great inlets, such as the Baltic and Adriatic seas in Europe, the Mediterranean, and Black Sea in both Europe and Asia, to carry maritime commerce into the interior parts of that great continent. And the great rivers of Africa are at too great a distance from one another to give occasion to any considerable inland navigation. So Adam Smith nailed in 1776 one of the key connections between geography, between access to the coast, access to navigable rivers, and development. Amazingly, it wasn't until some 200 or so years later that Jeff Sachs and others really began to pick this up and bring it back into the growth story. One reason to remember our history of economic thought. Okay, we'll be looking more at development and...
All right, so it was a little bit lengthy, but I'm sure you get the point that geography affects access to trade, and it affects, as I think it was Jerome who said, access to logistics. And what they showed is that countries that have greater access to coastal coastlines have higher GDP per capita versus countries that do not. Of course, there are criticism for this because the argument, the counter to that is that the Caribbean itself has access to coastlines, but of course, the countries are not rich in comparison to other coastal regions such as Europe or North America. And of course, we would have to go back. No, it's not just geography for us, but it's geography plus history. All right, so there are criticisms, legitimate criticisms of this particular school of thought, but of course, they're also very good. It's a very good way of understanding international trade. Another thing too, in relation to the Caribbean, in terms of geography, our geography serves us in the purpose that we have a competitive advantage in terms of tourism. So we are very close to quote unquote North America. To get to here from Canada or the United States, it's like not very far. I think to get to Miami, which I'm trying to go Miami tomorrow or Friday. It's less than an hour to get there. To New York, anybody has ever gone to New York from Jamaica? I'm not sure how long it is, if it's 3 or 4 hours. I know from Canada to Jamaica, at least I usually fly from Toronto to Jamaica, and it's 4.5 hours. That's not very far. That's like driving to Montego Bay. So we have a strategic advantage because of our geography in relation to international, quote unquote, international trade in terms of attracting foreigners who will be spending money. We also have to be mindful of the fact too, to think about geography in terms of not just location, but in terms of wildlife and topography, which also adds to the competitive advantage, because geography also includes or involves the kinds of resources that a country has. At this point in time, I'm going to start looking at, I want also for you to look at the example of Canada and how geography, and in terms geography as well as diversity of population. Did I touch that? Let me just make sure, because I know I'm looking at geography. Geographic diversity also contributes to economic development. And I think I have the example of Canada. Let me just see if it's Canada.
In this video, we will look at geographical factors as an external influence in the business environment. Two major factors that have an enormous.
But before we do that, let's just go to, I want to introduce it to the tutorial, because that's very, very critical for you to understand the tutorial. I think this would be the document. All right, it's not yet fleshed out, but we can look at it. Let me just share screen, because that's very critical. Where is it? Coursework. Okay, there. All right, are you seeing my screen? No, this is not what I want to show you. This is what I'm going to send you later. Okay, are you seeing my screen? Please answer.
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing, what are you seeing? Tell me what you're seeing.
Ring tutorial presentation.
All right, there you go. Beautiful. All right, so as I said, I'm still working on the logistics of everything. So next week, we will begin our tutorial presentation. So number one, everybody's going to do, we're all going to do number one together. All right, so I'm going to, in that class, I'm going to show you, we're going to use the last half hour of our 2-hour class to do the presentation, and you're going to work in pairs. So in this one, well, I haven't worked out the marks, but did I introduce you to Turnitin and all of that? I think I did, right? So the papers will be uploaded to Turnitin 1 week after the presentation. So when we talk about tutorial is really a way for you to go and reread and re-interact with the information and actually find additional information and present it to the class, and then we will ask questions, because it's a way for me to understand if you understand the content, and it's a way for me to help you to build as students, as let me call you as interrogators of information. So next week, we're going to discuss referencing a specific region or country, explore the impact of any 1 or 2 international businesses. And probably I should have said businesses or international organization, because we're not only looking at businesses at this point. And this is week 3, which is next week. Week 4 now, 2 persons, you're going to work in pairs and present on this question. Week 5.
Right, it's week 3, a dating is wrong because it's saying August 5th to 9th.
Next week is not August. Oh, no, it's July. Sorry. This should be July. Yes, thank you for that. Right, so it's July 5 to 9. All right. So all of us are going to do this question, and then the following week, week 4, 2 persons, you're going to work in pairs to do this. Week 5, two other persons. Week 6 is mid-semester. Week 8, because week 7, that's the week when you have the celebration, the whole independence or emancipendence or something of the sort. And then you have the research paper. So this would be 2, 4, is 8 of you are in the class, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, so 2, 4, 6.
Another student supposed to join the class. I'm not sure why you haven't joined us.
Yeah, so they're working out their issues. So I'll allow. What didn't I write in the date for this one? All right. So anybody seen a question that you like? Remember, you're going to work in pairs. This one, number one, is going to be done by everybody, including myself. So if you tell me the question that you would like, I can write your name or names beside it from now so that no one else can get the question. So
So I think it's best when we have more students.
it can be best. I'm not going to wait on other students. Why should I hold up my class for the other students? You are here now. I can't wait on other students. So if it is that anybody in the class that you see a question that you think you can manage, you can tell me no, I'll put your name beside it. Or if you want to wait until next week to make up your minds. This is graded.
Sir, give it till next week to make up our minds, sir.
All right. If I were you, I would I'm going to email it to you, but I would take a picture of it.
Yeah, question, sir.
Yes.
Did he send out no notes previously?
I sent you week one already. You guys don't check your emails?
Sir, remember Monday was my first class. I'm never get to ask in the first class, sir.
Okay, but you still never check your email. I sent it. I think I sent it before Monday or on Monday.
Oh, more would get it still, sir.
Oh, okay. So nobody's seeing anything that they like? It's actually not. Why you guys are running away from the questions? They're actually very easy questions.
Number five.
Oh, you want to wait until that long? You want to give yourself some time? All right, what's your name? What's your name?
Johnson.
All right, so Christopher, your mic is working. You're just not responding to me.
Kind of busy.
You're kind of busy. You can't be busy in my class, sir. I don't understand you when you say that you're busy. You're not supposed to be busy in my class.
Work purpose.
All right, so Christopher Johnson is doing this question, and you can do it with someone, or if you want to do it on your own. Anybody else wants to choose a question? Take your time and read the questions. They're actually not very difficult. I made sure of that. As I said, I'm still working out I'm just changing these dates are not correct. I'm just kind of changing a paper. When I used to teach at U, I'm just changing that paper. Clark, ecc.edu.jm. So let me just put this there. Probably I need to put it in a different color. Let's change it to purple. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to change some of this, but even the research area, effects of trade policies on this is going to be due I'll put in the date. So Christopher chose examine 3 to 5 reasons for a business deciding to go international. We're all doing number 1. So this would be 2, 4, 6, 8 students. If another student comes, I have another question because number 4 can be split in 2. Choose any 2 descriptive or prescriptive international trade theories and show how they explain the growth of international trade. So if one person chooses descriptive, then the other pair would choose descriptive.
Sir, may I select number 3, sir?
Number 3. Remind me of your name.
Parnell, Jerome.
So Jerome. What's your last name again?
Parnell, Parnell.
All right, so
Parnell.
All right, so Mr. Parnell is here. Let's go here. Let me put this in black. And you're really supposed to work as pairs. So I realize some persons are abstaining until until the following week. All right, no problems. If you choose to abstain. So Kayla or Shanique, you're going to hold off until Wednesday, right? Let me take that as a yes. And what I usually do when I get my tutorial questions, or when I get my tutorial question, I just start my research. So I know if I know that I'm looking at examining the role of internet,
Sir.
Yes.
What the structure and answer in these questions? Like essay type of thing or
So in the structure is that you're going to come and do a presentation. The presentation does not
Oh,
need to be
panda
right.
question.
Right. So it doesn't need to be an essay. However, the essay, the paper version of it now is due 1 week after your presentation. You have to upload that to turn it in. So you're going to get a grade for the presentation, the talking of it, but you also, and then you're going to get a grade for the paper itself.
With the question I'm choose.
Right. So in other words, you're going to get, for the oral presentation, you'll get 3 marks. For the paper, you'll get 7. So it becomes 10.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
So if if you work with somebody, and I'm recommending that we all work with somebody, what you do, you write down your question and you start kind of searching for information. I'll show you how to do the paper. So,
right.
Yes, go ahead.
So how long, what the duration would I get to present?
No more than 5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right.
So no, lie, that's not true. That's not true. What we usually say is 10 to 15 minutes, because it could be, for example, that you want to show some videos and all of that in your presentation. Once there's a structure to your presentation. So for example, a written paper, in a written paper now, let me give a perfect example, like how you present. And I'm going to show you next week, but I'm just going to preempt this. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robin Clark, and today I'm presenting on number 1, which says, referencing a specific region or country, explore the impact of any 1 or 2 international businesses or international organizations. For the purposes of my presentation, I'm going to choose the Caribbean, and I'm going to look specifically at the role that the World Trade Organization and the role the World Health Organization play in the Caribbean. So I'm going to first talk about the role of the international, the role of the World Trade Organization. And specifically, the 2 roles that I'm going to look at are 1, 2. Then they discuss. So I want to show you a video of some of the work that the World Trade Organization has been doing in the Caribbean or has done, and then I will explain a little bit more. Then you do that. Of course, persons are listening and they are going to ask questions about your presentation. They might say, is this good? Is this bad? I'm going to have questions. So you better know you better know the information, right? And of course, if you're citing sources, ensure that you actually acknowledge the sources in your presentation. You don't have to say according to, but you can say, well, you can say according to, but you can say, for example, in Jeffers or Anderson 2000 argues that, oh yes, and the sources that you're quoting from cannot be older than 10 years old. So we are in 2021. The source that you're quoting from cannot be less than 2011. It's not considered. I don't know if they teach you these things in academic writing, but they should. Unless the information that you're citing is really giving me some historicization or the etymology of the body that you're looking at. Am I making sense? Let me hear if you're understanding.
Yes, sir.
Right. So you come and you talk to us, you do a presentation. We don't want you to come and just read on a long paper. We want to hear, probably you're going to play an audio, you're probably going to show a video, you probably show an image, whatever it is. You might even play a song, whatever it is. Let us say that you find a song that really talk about one of the organizations, or a dancehall song or a reggae song, or any song outside of that really talks about the criticizes or talks about the good and bad of whatever. So those things are welcome in your presentation. 10 to 15 minutes, you have the opportunity to present to us. And if you're absent, you're going to get 0. Anybody who has a presentation and you're absent, I will give you 0. I could care less if you're dying. I'm just telling you that. I'm very frank. All right, because students have this tendency, whenever they have presentations, they come with the excuses they never had any service and they never had any data. Honestly, I don't care. You must come and do your presentation, because if you don't do your presentation, we don't have a tutorial, and the tutorial is there for you to grow, so that by the time you get to the final exam, you're an expert in the area. When sir asks you one question, sure, you just write it off the top of your head. When you're having a conversation with your peers, when you're watching CNN or any news, you actually, oh, I know about that, or I don't disagree with that, or I agree with that, or whatever. You can actually have meaningful conversations because you are in logistics. And of course, international trade is part of what you will have to do, or probably some of you are already practicing that. All right, so remember, no excuses for absence. If you're going to be absent, send us the presentation, or you're going to record the presentation and send it to us, and I play it, and then we write down our questions, and then when you're well, we ask you the questions. But you're not going to come and tell me any cock and bull story about you being sick and you're dying, and I don't care. You must come to your presentation. Remember, be warned, I will give you 0 if you miss my presentation. Any questions? I hope I didn't scare anybody. Persons are silent, although you guys are usually silent. Remember, there are textbooks in the library. I was trying to see if those books were accessible digitally. Oh yes, sources, no. How can you find sources outside of my notes, or even, let me just put up something, academia.edu. Anybody has ever heard about academia.edu? Have you ever heard about that?
No, sir.
Where is it? Is it this? Right. So academia.edu, let me copy the link and put it in the chat. If you don't have an account, go and create one. It gives you access to a lot of information. All right, so let me go. I think this is me. Here they're saying they want me to upgrade these criminals. They always want me to upgrade. I'm not upgrading. So this is, I actually have articles on this thing. Oh, I took down my picture. Which email is this? Let me see if I'm using my actual email. Because I actually mentions, these are just telling me persons who have quoted my work. But what they do, they try to get me to sign up. I'm not signing up. I don't have any money to sign up for this thing. I can get articles. All right, so when you go into academia.edu, once you create an account, let's just say that you're looking at, you might say, you just type into search rules of the World Trade Organization. Once you press enter, you're going to find articles, very, very good. Don't upgrade. I don't want that. World Trade, and you're going to see many articles that you can quote from. Many, many articles. Notice, so they're telling you, paper titles, 73,000. 73,000. So you just look at exactly what you want. So you have World Trade Organization, blah, blah, blah. You have next, you can go into other. Let's just take one of the examples from the tutorial paper. Let's say we are looking at, let's look at the last one. Let's see if we type it into academia.edu, what comes up. And remember about plagiarism. All right. Did I tell you that I teach English, right? I teach academic writing. So when it comes down to plagiarism, I'm a god. All right, so this is the last question. Reasons for companies going international. You can go through and find all kinds of things. Papers are there galore. If you want to look at, the topic that we were looking at, geography and economic development, let's type in geography and economic development. Let's see what comes up. Geography and econ, and this is actually a case study. And that's actually, you can actually, if you get a question on that, that's actually how you can do it. Development, geography, and economic theory, and you're seeing loads and loads of, if you click on this first one, there is actually going to tell you, sometimes they don't give you access, sometimes, remind me later. Get this summary, I don't want the goddamn summary. Okay, load for me. Why it's not loading? I don't want to download anything. Oh, here's the entire, I've actually downloaded the entire paper. It's 59 pages in length, so, but I'm not going to read this. It's actually not in English. Oh yes, it is in English. Let's take this off. Let me see if I find myself my own paper. Sparta. Did I log in with my, which email is this? Because I'm not seeing my articles. Right. So this is what I've written. This is actually my paper that I wrote. This was actually published in a book. So I have a paper on Tommy. I don't know if you know that I did my master's in cultural studies. I have a paper on Tommy. I have a paper on Vibes Cartel. I have a paper on, what else did I? So this is my paper on Tommy that was published, but I don't put the actual published version. This is just a version. Then I have a paper on cartel because I do culture, so that's what I write about at the time. So this is a paper on cartel that I'm trying to get published. Right, so once you go there, you will get information. Another source that you can use is, what time is it to ensure that I'm not, oh, I'm keeping you over. Oh, sorry guys. So enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you on Monday. I have another class myself. Bye everybody.